Hello and welcome to NDTV Profit. The interim budget has set a vision to become India to become a developed country. Now, staying on this path is going to be critical. As we get along, the most important question that keeps coming for a country like India, which is resilient in terms of its economy, there is political stability and the fastest growing economy. The question that arises is, will international rating, global rating agencies upgrade India's rating? Now, that's the big question we are asking today evening after the interim budget has set a very clear path of fiscal consolidation. Now, who better to answer this than Christian de Guzman, Senior Vice President, Sovereign Risk Group at Moody's Investor Services. Thanks for joining us, Christian. Welcome to NDTV Profit.
Thanks for having me, Moody.
Okay, so my first question is loaded in my intro itself. When will India get its upgrade?
Well, I think I'd like to answer that question by referring to our published downward triggers. So when we do have ratings, we do express to the market what it would take for us to upgrade or change the outlook to positive, or to downgrade or change the outlook to negative. So in that context, we have publicly said that it would take very material debt reduction on the back of material deficit consolidation and continued high growth. And accompanying that would be an improvement in what we call debt affordability. So in essence, what we're looking for is an improvement in the weak points of India's sovereign credit profile. You've already mentioned some of the strong points, such as the very strong economic growth for even a country this large. We also have a few strengths that we haven't mentioned. I think we do have a nice track record of macroeconomic stability and overall institutional strength. We have political stability, as you mentioned. That doesn't mean everything is well with political risk, but we can get into that. We also have a stable banking system, a recently more stable banking system. So there's a lot of strengths, but there are also weaknesses that need to be addressed before we can consider upgrading India.
Right. Okay. So that's a very interesting observation. There are many tick boxes we can tick from the checklist. Before I come to the most important question of the overall debt, I would like to have your reaction on today's budget. We have very clearly set a fiscal, prudence and management path. What is your reaction?
Well, my reaction is that in many ways, this was really more of a political statement, in terms of what the budget speech represented, rather than really, a very detailed plan, fiscal or economic, in terms of going forward. Indeed, one of the highlights of the budget speech is the announcement of a white paper, in essence, doing a report to the populace, to the voting population, of the good things that have been done over the past 10 years. So having said that, we do acknowledge that there is a very firm communication of that commitment to fiscal deficit consolidation. We do have the government basically committing again and again towards that 4.5% of GDP deficit by 25-26. In the details, I think what we have found is that deficit consolidation is being driven by lower spending as a share of GDP rather than increasing revenue. So perhaps there's some risk here, as shocks propagating from the challenging global environment, or maybe even climate-related shocks. I think El Nino is still a risk for the region, for example. This could perhaps push up expenditures more than what we currently envision, or what the budget envisions. And then perhaps on the revenue side, I mentioned debt affordability earlier. Debt affordability, we can measure that by interest payments to revenue. We are in a currently high interest rate environment, and so what is perhaps needed to improve debt affordability is to increase revenue, and we didn't quite see any significant revenue or tax measures in this interim budget.
Yeah, so as the finance minister suggested, there are no tax measures because it's an interim budget. More importantly, she has set the path for a developed economy, and they are going to come out with a very clear roadmap to achieve the stage of developed economy over a period of whatever 10 years or so. My next question is on the issue of risk arising from interest rates. Now that risk is abating. If you see, we have reached a pivot globally. In India, inflation is also coming under control. The RBI governor has said that in another 1 or 1.5 years, we would be able to achieve that inflation target. So the interest rate risk is also waning as far as the country is concerned. How would you look at that?
Well, it is indeed true that the interest rates are waning, but they are currently high. And they have been high for the past year or so. So, which means that the debts that were incurred over the past year carry these higher interest rates. And we don't expect interest rates for the Fed to be cutting rates over the next quarter at least. We're only looking at the Fed cutting rates in the middle of the year, for example, which means that the debts that are going to be incurred over the next few months are also going to carry these high interest rates, including the debts that were incurred, some of the debts that were incurred during the pandemic at very low rates. So you can see how that those refinancing pressures at these currently high interest rates are going to continue to apply pressure on what we call debt affordability. But yes, I would agree, over the medium term, interest rates will come down and it will alleviate some pressure, but the pressure is still not, has not yet abated.
Okay, so let me come back to the critical question. So we have a situation where we need to push growth. If we push growth, expenditure has to be pushed, capex expenditure has to be pushed. The states are also being empowered through a scheme where the center will give them a loan, 50-year interest-free loan of 75,000 crores to be given to the state to help reach the developed economy goal. Now, see, this is also going to be a very important development insofar as, so that will also help the state governments, right? So from that perspective, how do you see our debt to GDP ratio, the combined one, from the centers and the states?
Sure. It's good that you sort of bring that up, because our sovereign credit rating actually looks at not just the union budget, but what we call the general government balance. So that includes the union budget plus the states. And here, I think there is perhaps less evidence of more significant fiscal consolidation, given that the states themselves have not exhibited the same kind of fiscal discipline that the union government has over the past couple of years. Yes, there has been progress, but it's still a weak point relative to where we see the union government in terms of their progress. Now, with perhaps the other part of your question is it going to help? Now here, perhaps it's not just about funding growth or funding development. India has always had very good access to funding, whether it's tapping the deep domestic capital markets or tapping multilateral development bank debt, debt from the World Bank or the ADB, which then comes with technical assistance to facilitate that development. So financing is not the issue. It's what will these states do with that funding? Is there enough absorption capacity at the local levels to really maximize the development impact of these funding avenues that have been made available by the union government?
Right. So from the checklist that you mentioned, the only area where we cannot clearly tick is the combined debt of both the state and the center. The data that I just looked at shows that the ratio has come down sharply from 88% in 2022 to about 81% in 22-23. Now, where should that go down for India to qualify for a rating? Does it have to go down by another 10 or 20% lower?
So let me maybe perhaps take a step back. The weak point in our sovereign credit rating assessment of India is fiscal strength. And fiscal strength is broadly can be encapsulated into two things, which I mentioned and which we have been talking about. The first, of course, is debt, and debt is very high. And yes, it has come down, but I think a lot of the analysis that we do is comparative in nature. While it has come down, it's still over 80% of GDP. the general government debt levels are still over 80% of GDP, which is still higher than all other BAA rated emerging market economies.